My guest on this week's episode of Suds Search is Chris Boggs, founder of Web Traffic Advisors. Chris is a veteran digital marketer, blogger, conference speaker, and he's been a judge for numerous awards shows. I caught up with Chris after his presentation at PubCon Austin about saving money on Google Ads. We had a wide-ranging discussion about the role of Google reps, how to save money with match types, and tips to eliminate waste in Performance Max campaigns. Chris is also an industry veteran with over 20 years of experience. In addition to PPC, his agency does SEO, video, and content work. With the emergence of ChatGPT, this is a moment of significant change. Chris is the perfect person to talk to for advice in the current environment. Grab something cold to drink and join me for a conversation with Chris Boggs. We'll talk about the risks of auto-applying recommendations from Google. We'll spend a little time chatting about ChatGPT, and I'm going to ask Chris about the pesky problem of underspending on a PPC campaign. Chris, welcome to Suds Search. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Mark. Thanks for the invite. Looking forward to chatting and sudsing with coffee.
I love it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to you. I wanted to start by asking you about a presentation. You just got back from PubCon Austin. I guess that was a few weeks ago. And your presentation was about saving money on Google Ads. You know, one of the things that I liked about it, at the beginning of your speech, you're sort of cluing people into some things that are happening at Google. So, for instance, we're getting these calls from reps, and our clients get calls from the Google reps. And overall, the experience is pretty lousy. They're not that helpful or particularly knowledgeable, in my experience. I don't mean to besmirch all of them, but I think this could be confusing to someone listening who hasn't gone through this. I mean, I think after all, people are probably going like, they work for Google. I don't. I don't work for Google.
Certainly
they must have some more knowledge than I'm leading on. Basically, what can you tell our viewers about Google reps that may surprise them, and how you found some way to use that network to improve campaigns for clients?
Well, Google, became XYZ through basically being able to almost print money as a result of what they're doing online with their advertising, right? And so, in general, their goal is to get advertisers to spend money, right, at the highest level. So what they've instituted over the last, I would say, more aggressively in the last 5 years, but definitely, beginning a good 10 years ago, probably, was this idea of trying to coach clients along with their advertising campaigns and helping to introduce new functionality, which again goes back to the main thing about making money, right? So if we flash forward to today and we look at Performance Max, it's a great example, right, of what it's evolved to, but we can talk about that later. The point is that these reps are trained, and depending, it's very clear, and it's not like I'm, somehow against some sort of an NDA or something, but based on your spend tier is the level of rep you're going to get, right? So let's start at that. So if you're spending 10, 20, 30 grand a month or much more than that, which a lot of advertisers do, you're going to get a rep that's likely, and I don't want to say US based or anything like that, right? So they're just more experienced. And they're also likely experienced within the specific industry. For example, I had a client that was doing B2B software. They were spending, north of 150 grand, and they had access to this guy who knew pretty much, some of the trends, and it was helpful, and it was good access to someone who was communicating with other B2B software entities. So there was value there, right? So if we tear way down and all the way down, and in fact, this particular entity that I'm talking about, they dropped their spend because, long story short, I came in and I audited and no one was looking at their conversions and they was guiding the system wrong and they had no revenue from it. So the spend immediately dropped, right? When it was identified that it was completely useless, essentially. And that immediately almost got one of those umbrella hooks on our guy, and very quickly we became introduced to the next tier down. It was still a reasonable spend. This guy wanted to help, but he and what I'm getting to here is that they're all on scripts, kind of, right? And he was more noticeably on a script, I would say, right? In that he said, "Have you tried Performance Max? Have you done this?" Right? And he's doing stuff that we, as educated marketers, we don't really want to hear this, and it's annoying also if it's wasting our clients' time if we're doing the call together with them, and they're like, "Well, you should try display. You should go." And by the way, on the prior call or even earlier in the call, I've said, hey, the conversion signal's no good. So we can't use conversion oriented goals or mechanisms within the campaigns. And then later in the call, they'll hit the part on the script that says you should switch to conversion guided goals. And it's very head scratching and annoying. As you can tell, my crescendo might be rising slightly.
Right.
But the point is that the less you spend to the more reliant these people are. Literally, like, I had a call with one and some other two guys were randomly on the Google meeting screen. It's like, oh, these two people are training. And then I got an email like the next day, hey, so-and-so is your new rep. And the guy, it might've been his first call the day before. Right. And so they're basically being taught by these reps that then they have to have two guys that come in and listen in and watch them. Essentially, they're looking at the same screen, probably, right? That's reading them through a script. And so it's a little bit insulting, I think, first of all, to marketers like us that have invested time and maybe even years in challenging ourselves and the Google platform to try to get ROI from it, to then suddenly have these guys call your clients and come in and then represent themselves as experts when most of my clients can tell, like, and they end up they're like, just take the call. Right. And a lot of times I'm like, I don't want to take the call. But for some I will. And because we're trying to work through some little thing, which maybe they can help us increase the size of an audience that we've uploaded 80,000 and they can only hit 8,000 or, little things like that, where these people might, I think, have some value if they can connect you to the right entities. So that was a long-winded answer, but that's sort of where I feel about Google reps in a semi-large nutshell, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I would share that sentiment. I think it's one example where Google, I don't know, it's a little devious. Maybe it's maybe good business. I don't know, but it's where they make it look like it's free advice or free education, but really the first priority of these things is to make Google more money. Another one that you point out in your talk that's similar to this is that they have these like auto apply recommendations. So you can make Google will give you these recommendations. That's from Google. It's got to be good. It's got to be right.
Yeah, and I didn't hit on that in my first answer, but you're right. To a lot of people too, then, that's kind of, wow, that, somebody at .google.com or at, so-and-so at google.com is actually emailing me to talk about this. Of course, right. If I'm a business owner, and especially if I'm a business owner that's not 100% sure, which I think it's just a commonality of business owners. They're business owners, so they will think they know, right? Or they might know more, or whatever. So it'll cause them in their head to wonder if maybe they're going to miss out on something if they don't hear what this Google rep. So that's why a lot of times I'm like, okay, let's talk to them, right? But I always preface them with, I'm telling you, they're going to want you to spend more money, and they're probably going to talk to us about some of the stuff that we've already tested that we know doesn't work. And typically 99% of the time I'm accurate, right? And because we get on the call and then after they're like, oh my God, you're right. And so forth. So, but it's true. You're right. And it gets, to the next level then, they're giving these, oh, well, I can just set it and forget it. And I'll just, and that's the problem. The auto applies. It's funny. It overlaps with the same case study that I just talked about, where they had turned on the auto applies at the beginning of last year, which was adding, keywords like broad match, just the word LLC, and some Salesforce spreadsheet template was another one. And there was about eight different spreadsheet template keywords that, theoretically the system was trying to advertise on, but you could see there was no impressions. And you could tell that the system was feeding itself so much crap that there was like, even the performance was suffering from it. Right. And so that's the other part. And this is something I've noticed personally since early days when they were doing auto apply with ads, is that, often our best, if you do a champion challenger model or something with an ad unit, the best performing champion is going to 4 or 5x outperform anything they throw at it, right? That they think they can do AI wise. So it's frustrating, and it's been frustrating for years to try. And again, I'm talking about at I would call it a boutique level approach to marketing the campaigns, right? I'm not talking about like a 10,000 product Google ad campaign or something like that, right? There, you do need some of that. And I think that as long as you can guide the technology the right way and that it's going to auto apply based on information that's accurate, then I'm okay with some of that, right? For scale. But if I really want to approach this scientifically and try to improve my ROAS, I'm going to mostly turn off the auto apply. In almost every checkbox is off for me.
Well, interesting. I agree with this 100%. One place where I was surprised a little bit, but I think it was smart, was broad match keywords in Google right now are something that's like, Google takes such liberties with these things. It's like it's so broad, and generally speaking, it's not a match type I like to utilize. You had an interesting use case for it. How do you, when you think of broad match keywords today? Geez, there were so many things about match types last year, but when you think about broad match keywords now, how are you approaching it? Where do you think there is a benefit to using them, if at all?
I would say there's a couple instances. One is, first of all, you can argue that exact match is phrase match, and phrase match is broad match, and broad match.
You can
is
get down these. You can get into these discussions.
I will note here, not to diss too much Bing, but Bing's broad is even broader, right? But let's just focus on Google for a second, and the instance where it may work, and I have tested it, is where you do have the mechanism feeding back in from a HubSpot or a Salesforce that's accurately identifying conversions and actual MQLs and on through to sales, right? If it can get that data into it, and then you can apply that to an audience for a broad match text ad campaign, then that does make sense, I think, to test it, as long as you're limiting your number of broad match. The problem, though, that I found is that it's getting harder and harder. The other side of the story, another way to use broad match that I found is, like, let's say you check the difference between rates and pricing. I'll give you that one. You'll be surprised, like, how many more query matches are right, either with rates or pricing, right, for what you're actually looking for. And it's just kind of, I've found, a crapshoot, right? Like, and you have to do a little testing. And that's where, for broad match, for me, is still important, is because I want to use it for testing, and I want to have it help me identify queries. However, the problem is that that's becoming harder and harder. It looks to me, at least across a lot of different campaigns, is that they're trying to show you what you want to see in the query report now, and they're still they're hiding more and more, like, of what really wouldn't be a good match. Yeah. Now, in the early campaigns, though, for example, for some of this B2B stuff, which was in a financial niche, I was able to effectively harvest a negative keyword match list, right? That's what I'm talking about. Really, the value of broad 2 is not only to harvest the keywords, but to harvest the negatives and to try to train the system. And I found that's where I actually answered a question in the panel, where I was able to get in the education space a specific type of software, where we had like a 22% click-through rate, based on targeting a couple broad terms, but really limiting it with negative and a few other, variables. But it is very I think it can be effective, but it has to be guided correctly. And also you have to understand that there will be, I think, more natural waste or shrinkage or whatever you want to call it, as a
Yeah,
result of using it.
yeah. I'm just thinking as you're talking, I was thinking of how much this job has changed over the time I've been in this industry. Like a big part of the job of working in PPC now is just avoiding wasteful spend. That's really it. Like a huge part of it. We talked about the ways Google will take advantage of people who aren't as savvy, I guess. But
Yeah.
a lot of this just has to do with finding negatives and mining for negative keywords and stuff like that. Do you have any other tips or go-to strategies for avoiding wasteful spend, for not just lighting money on fire, because it's easy to
Yeah.
do. It's really
Yeah.
easy to do.
Well, I mean, I think I've touched on it, but just to be very clear, like if you don't trust your conversion data, don't let it guide anything,
Great
right?
advice. Yep.
Figure out another way. Maximize clicks I'd rather use than, conversion guided data, especially if I'm in an early kind of phase, right? You're going to have to expect to lose a little bit money depending on where the funnel you are, right? And so you should have some, willingness to waste more if it's a higher funnel goal for the campaign, but you should look for more and more ways to save the further down the funnel you get. I think, in general, the other thing too would be to consider some of the settings, like they've moved them around. Now there's content suitability tool, I think it's called, where you used to be able to, at a campaign level or even ad group level, say, hey, I don't want this to show on park domains, right? This is one of those things that I like to say. It's like in Google Analytics where they when you set it up, the box is unchecked for block all known bots and spiders, right?
Right.
Why would you have that unchecked as the default, right?
Right.
That should be checked.
Yes. Yes.
So to me, this is an example of
Notification.
unchecked stuff, right? That's within the system. And that a lot of people, if they're setting up a new campaign or account, especially, there's unchecked stuff that needs to be checked, and stuff like park domains. I don't want my ads showing on park domains, right? I also don't want G rated, especially in education, actually, because unless it's a parent guided, then I do definitely want G rated. But content levels, the whether it's G or PG and et cetera, are not known. And then there's content types. I'll pick most of them. I'm okay with tragedy or shocking and sensational or whatever, but there's a one type that I can't think of right now that I typically don't allow, which is adult. I think it's adult oriented content or whatever, because most of my brands don't want their ad to suddenly be screenshotted next to some adult thing, right? So that's, to me, the other missing piece sometimes is the check boxes that aren't checked that you should.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great answer. And the other thing you mentioned before that I think probably dovetails into this nicely is performance max and PMax campaigns. And I don't know if there's a topic that quite stirs the emotions of my PPC friends quite like performance max. In your presentation, you compare it to TV advertising on Google, and you say that if you're having trouble with a campaign that's underspending, this can help. I thought that was really clever. How are you advising clients to use performance max PMax campaigns? Where do you see areas where you don't want to go all in on PMax?
I've only begun testing it with a couple clients that have the additional budget, right? And it's, April of 23. Everyone's trepidatious right now. A lot of spend is pulling back or whatever. So this might not be the best time for Google and for a lot of people to test Performance Max, right? But there are some marketers out there, the TV spenders, that will be fine with it, right? And there's some agencies that probably aren't even telling their clients that, they're doing Performance Max. Now, what I've heard anecdotally is that e-commerce has been the best space so far for Performance Max. What I found was the leads we did get a little uptick in some leads and some software stuff with the initial testing, but the quality wasn't any better than what we were doing with other optimized campaigns, right? So, but it was at a higher cost. What worries me about I'm more worried about Performance Max now. Again, if I'm in e-commerce and I'm meeting the ROAS, then I'll run it all day and I'll keep adding more money to it, right? But I'm worried about ROAS and ROI, right? We just spent 20 minutes talking about ways to save money. So this is a system, like, that's why I compared to TV, is that you're just kind of throwing the money and you're hoping to get return. If you're Ford or Toyota, you can, as a marketer, argue to your CEO that, hey, the money I spent on TV, we sold all these extra cars, right? It wasn't that people suddenly needed new cars or anything. But the point is that, that's kind of what you have to have the attitude with if you're going to spend on Performance Max, I think. You can, though, get some value from it. I believe at a branding level, at a top of funnel level, right? You just have to be very aware. And there's a lot of great conversation out there on Twitter, PPC chat and stuff like that, right? Where people are talking about what's taken away from you, right? So if you have like bid adjustments, any type of bid adjustments, it's gone with Performance Max. Basically, you're turning on all the auto apply stuff. So the other one that I think is important is if you have any concern about how your brand is presented, then don't use Performance Max. Right. There was a great summary of it in one of the presentations at PubCon, but that was one of the three, because they will literally go find old logos or whatever they want. If the AI thinks, well, it would look much better with this 2013 logo than their current logo, they'll do it. And then suddenly you'll have these ads. And so as an agency, you have to be careful for that, because we all know about the screenshot emails, right? And that'll be the problem that will happen with Performance Max. And who knows, like, if there's some bleed over, right? I mean, we're starting to see, at least on the SEO side, some stuff where like micro formatting on a page that's crawled because of, stuff that has a different price or offer. And then it's suddenly they have it on the organic SERP. So I just, I don't want anything to be allowed to be created that could potentially, I mean, that's a pretty tinfoil hat that it would jump over, right? But it's possible that some of these assets that Performance Max is creating could, at least be shared in a negative sense for the brand. That's a big worry for me, for a big brand especially.
Well, very interesting, and I want to kind of shift gears before we go, because we're at the point in the show, right? We're almost out of time, but I haven't asked you anything about ChatGPT or AI or any of this stuff, and we have to do that. So
amazing.
Yeah,
I've been answering, by the way, really quickly. Well, all my answers have been ChatGPT 4, by the way. No,
right, exactly. It's getting pretty good. So, I think it's, for the audience, it's good context to say we've been talking a lot about PPC, but your agency does SEO, does video, does a suite of services you provide. And you've got a lot of experience. So I thought you'd be a good person to ask about this. A week or two ago, Goldman Sachs came out and said 7% of all the jobs in the United States could be replaced with AI. They think that internationally 300 million jobs will be disrupted. I can tell, like, this is like the feeling I have when I go on Twitter and talk to my friends in this industry, that some friends are loving this stuff and some friends are concerned. It's very polarizing that way. Many don't like this change. I just straight up, they don't like that this could impact their job.
They don't like the automated registers at the grocery store either.
No, yeah, exactly. So I think really the question I wanted to ask you is, what professional qualities, what sorts of abilities, skills do you think that digital marketers have to have in order to thrive and really not be impacted negatively by ChatGPT and other AI generated content generation?
I have to always quote Brett Tapke on this one, because I think his is the best single statement about it, is that he had people approaching him that were worried about losing their jobs to ChatGPT, right, and to AI. And his response was, you won't lose your job to AI, but you may lose your job to someone that's leveraging or using AI, right?
Oh, that's
So
interesting.
it's that simple, right? And we as marketers, we think a lot about ourselves. It's been 20 years of online marketing and stuff. And part of the reason that we get a lot of positive self attitude is because we're constantly learning new stuff, right, as it comes out. So to me, it's just about the learning, right? And understanding too. I think you hear a lot of noise. People want to make ChatGPT the scapegoat, right? And the same thing with the checkout lines at the grocery stores, right? Oh, that's taking away humans that need jobs. Well, no, and there's plenty of ways to argue that there's other better things that humans could be doing than swiping the cost of something and putting it into a bag, right? I could sit there and argue all day with you about why make two humans do that process when one could, right? But the point is that AI is a great tool, right? And there's a lot in the early days also of misunderstanding, like people that are starting to get a handle on what search is. And then overlapping it, right? Because it really isn't. Search is much more real time. It's a totally different animal, right? And then comparing Bard and sort of this more sort of higher level and Bing AI, that's kind of what's called hard machine learning versus soft machine learning or something. There's some technology name about it, but there's a different tier there, right? So if we're talking about just ChatGPT 4, really, you could call it a glorified encyclopedia, right? And it's more so of an encyclopedia than a search engine because it's limited to the data that it has in it, right? And that it's been taught. Versus a search engine, which has a combination of that and the ability to understand and discern between recency and fact and fiction sometimes. But there's a big difference, right? And so at the very beginning, where I'm seeing an overlap happening, where there's some confusion about what ChatGPT really is, right? And it's not going to take over. I worry for artists and I worry for writers, but if they leverage it, artists is who I'm most worried about. Writers, I think they should leverage it and it's just going to make their writing better. But artists, I'm really worried for, because and eventually there will be, there's people now that go buy turntables and discs, records. And I put mine away 25 years ago or whatever, right? That came back. And so art will definitely always have a place, but at scale and for marketing, that's where, it's much easier to say, hey, I want a picture of a kid that's learning on a computer, or something like that. And boom. And it can pass your legal and compliance. It's original. There's so much like efficiency. So as an artist, that's where you really, I think, have to start to embrace more so and figure out how you can leverage or how you can sell against AI. There's a lot of stuff on that side, I think.
Awesome. Well, this is my last thing. You mentioned Barrett and Bing's got their ChatGPT infused version of this, and I think this is the most I've ever heard SEOs talk about Bing. PPC folks, yes, but SEOs are talking about Bing, and there's this supposed first mover advantage, and they were ahead of Google for a change on AI. For most of my career, Google's been so dominant that I didn't even really report on Bing that much. It wasn't that big of it was almost pointless. Where are you at with Bing? Are you taking a fresh look? Are you interested in their approach to AI, or you think status quo is a status quo?
I only have so much time in my day as a consultant. I'm actually rolled my sleeves up a lot, so I played too much with ChatGPT. So I'm kind of laying off it a little bit, and I never signed up for the Bing one. I did sign up for Bard, and I got in there, and I've played around with it a little bit. But I personally just don't have the time to give to the Bing one. One thing that I also like it's on my bookshelf of wanting to do is to get more into the Bing webmaster tools because there's a lot of cool stuff in there, and are apparently going to start making some connections there too. So it's on my to-do list, but I can't really talk too much to that right now yet.
All right, I love it. Well, Chris, if anybody's watching this, it's been great to talk to you. But if anybody's watching this and want to learn more about you or your agency or favorite places to connect on social, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Cool. Well, I'm on Twitter at Boggles, just Boggles, and Web Traffic Advisors with an O.com is my website.
All right, awesome. I love that Twitter handle. Very good. Well, Chris, thank you very much. I'm going to give you a virtual cheers. And
cheers to you, Mark, and thank you very much, and your background team, Carolyn and all them, for setting everything up.
You got it. And for everybody else, we'll be back next week with another episode of Suds Search. Thanks, Chris.
Great. Cheers.